Hi, welcome to Unspoken History. My name is Keisha. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I want to talk about the American Colonization Society that was created to colonize Africa um, and to use Black Americans to do it. So I always wondered, and then I heard some stories about why um, the white they said the white people were not able to colonize Africa, but the Europeans were never able to I think it was Portugal first that went over there first. Of course, yeah, it was Portugal in the 1400s, 1450s. And the only area that white people have been able to colonize in Africa is South Africa. Their colonization in the 1800s, that was, you know, later on, but they were not able to colonize Africa the way they did America. And they were over there first. And a lot of the articles say it's because of the tropical diseases, because of the hostile natives, the hostile people on the continent. Um, the climate was not something that they were used to. They couldn't stand the heat, I guess. But there was a whole bunch of stories about this was why, that was why, this is why, that was why. But then in the 1800s, they used Black Americans to go over and colonize first this island that used to be called Darzo, or Dazoa Island. And there were people living there. There were African people living there, Dazoa people, or whatever they were called, living there. And so this property was purchased. I don't know how. That's what it says. The property was purchased. And then they sent these American freedmen over there to colonize that area of what is now called Liberia. And I got two videos here that I'm going to show that shows that they went over there and did the exact same thing that Europeans did over here to black people. And they were black people. So I'm gonna show a video from the 1980s that is talking about the Civil War and stuff that happened over there, and then I'm gonna show a video of those Black Americans who decided to come back home. But I thought you were home. And also, when I was reading the articles about the blacks that went over to the Black Americans that went over to Africa, to the west coast of Africa, to the area now known as Liberia, they said they immigrated with an E, immigrated. So when you immigrate with the E, that means you're leaving your home country and going to another one. So when they were able to come back, that's because this is their country. They went over there as colonizers, and if this thing had gotten bigger, then they would have been able to send people to other areas of Africa to colonize. That's just my personal opinion. So anyway, let's watch this video. Also, before we watch the video, let me say who I think these people are, because it says American freedmen like they were ex indentured, ex slaves, like perpetual slavery. That, oh, now they're free, and then we're gonna pay for them to go over there and colonize. No, it was those other blacks. That's my personal opinion. So anyway, let's watch the video. 1980s throwback.
Native Sons is about black Americans who returned to Africa long before Alex Haley and Roots to found the first republic on that continent, Liberia, a nation on the east coast of Africa whose roots are in the United States. Most of the news out of Africa, independent Africa, and southern Africa has been a catalog of brutality, tribal war, and insane slaughter. Well, Liberia is free of those things, but it suffers from a different, less newsworthy kind of African sickness. The sadness and seediness, petty corruption, and grand larceny, black and white mischief. You'll find it all in Liberia. Liberia calls itself a republic. In fact, it is an oligarchy, ruled by a few, but the few that belong to 300 families descended from the original settlers. Families who are at the top and see to it that they stay at the top. 150 years ago, American philanthropists and freed slaves had the idea of a state in Africa. It was in no sense a return to a promised land, but an escape from a land that held no promise. The Liberian Declaration of Independence is modeled on the American one, except for some key language. It states that Liberians were originally Americans, who were forced by conditions to seek asylum abroad from their deep degradation. And so they landed on this beach as colonists, American colonists, who imposed themselves on what they called the uncivilized natives. Africa was as alien to them as it was to the first white settlers elsewhere. And just as in the white settlements, everything that was done in the name of Christian civilization. They brought with them their Western religion and proceeded to convert the natives to it. The result has been a unique Christianity with echoes of an Africa as old as life. But to those Pilgrim Fathers, America was the old country. They named places Maryland and New Georgia and Virginia. And they built houses that have that same southern look, a cross between the old slave quarters and the old plantation house. The absence of a colonial legacy has its disadvantages. No tradition of civil service, terrible communications, primitive education and medical care. In Liberia, they started from scratch with little outside help. Not even the conscience money its neighbors received from former colonial masters. All it got from America was a memory. The grand old flag with 49 fewer stars. The currency is the US dollar. The mailboxes are American. The cop on the beat wears a New York City Police Department uniform. The capital is Monrovia, named after US President James Monroe. Liberia is stable without the paratroop enforcers you find in so much of black and white Africa. This is the Liberia most familiar to Americans, the Liberia of President William Tubman. He ran things as an elected dictator for 27 years. It had the look of 19th century America in blackface. Tubman insisted on things like silk hats and frock coats. Everyone, diplomats included, sweated it out in the West African heat. But the clothes clearly defined the classes. The only thing the colonialists had in common with the natives was the color of their skin. It was ruled by elite, by the top 300 families who could trace their lineage back to the Exodus. Well, Tubman's gone. He died 8 years ago and was replaced by this man, William Tolbert. The president still sets the rules for dress. The leisure suit has replaced the frock coat. There have been other changes, but mainly in look and style. It is still ruled by elite, by the top people who regard the nation as a private inheritance. The president disputes this, says Liberia is a democracy. It does have an American-style constitution, a Senate and a House of Representatives, and free elections. But there's only one party, and that's been the case for all of this century. Liberians resent things like the report that Ambassador Andrew Young described them as a bunch of Uncle Toms. And they're angry with President Carter, who passed through the country on his trip to Africa. No way to be treated by the mother country.
You see, the president passed through here and went to Nigeria and stayed there for days and came here for a few hours. That's your daughter? You pass by your daughter and go to somebody else's place and stay 2-3 days, and you didn't even lay your head on one pillow in her house. Tell her, we don't like it, and she will change her ways. Thank you.
The top families, known as honorables, number about 40,000 out of Liberia's 1.7 million people. They have names like Carter and Phillips and Dennis. This is a wedding party that the Coopers are giving for the Campbells. There are impossibly complicated cross-connections through intermarriage in these family trees. It ensures that power and money remains in the same hands generation after generation. And the American connection is continually being reinforced. Most young Americo-Liberians are educated in the United States, and they often bring back American brides. That's what one of the Bernard brothers did. They've both just returned from college at North Carolina and Western Michigan to take up the family fortune amassed by their late father, the former director of police. So there's the transportation company, the car rental, the bus service, the heavy trucking of gas.
Right.
There's this extraordinary beachfront property that's going to become a holiday hotel.
Exactly. Apartments, farms, other real estate here and there.
This is not, I got to tell you, an image of Africa and Africans that most Americans have.
We do have a mixture of the indigenous African and then what some would call the civilized African. We are sort of a blend of, both.
One of the reasons for the blend is that marital fidelity in Liberia is almost unheard of. President Tolbert himself has only one wife, but he has children by many women, and is said to be as virile at 65 as he was in his 20s. He's a Baptist minister and former head of the World Baptist Alliance, but he feels no moral or ethical conflict. One of the fascinating things about life in this country, particularly for an outsider, are the family relationships. I mean, how it works, so that a man may have a wife and a couple of mistresses and have children that are born out of wedlock that are nevertheless brought into the family. And in your own youth, I gather, sir, that you fathered children outside your immediate family. How does it work?
It works well. Liberian life is peculiar life. In fact, we are a close-knit people. If you touch one, you touch more or less all. Those who are not related by blood somehow or another, they are close. We have what we call the extended family life.
The Bernard boys had the same father, but different mothers. One, the father's wife, the other, their father's friend. It isn't a question of many wives.
No. It's the
one
children.
wife.
We don't. It's not a matter of polygamy. It's. There's only one wife. My father's only had one wife at a time, and it's not a matter of just.
He had one wife, but how many children did he have by women other than that one wife?
Oh, about 13.
Really?
Yeah.
Liberia has great wealth and has a reputation for being easy pickings for the international conglomerates, providing they deal with the right families. Firestone Tire owns most of the rubber, along with eminent Liberians. The field hands earn $7.50 a week. And there's iron. A foreign consortium extracts the ore, and the government extracts half their profits. And for special people, special shares were created. So a few benefit grandly from this joint venture. And Liberia has the world's largest shipping fleet registered under its flag, a flag of convenience. The convenience being tax breaks and casual scrutiny of crews and ships. And there's talk of oil, and there's uranium and gold and diamonds, and vast resources of timberlands that are just beginning to be exploited. But the fact is, most of the wealth that all of those natural blessings Liberia has stays up there among the 40,000 people at the top of the heap. And no one is more top than William Tolbert, this great-great-grandchild of slavery who can trace his roots back to South Carolina, has farms and rubber plantations, and family connections with businesses all over the country.
Welcome to the GED Academy. My name is Leonard, and I'm going to be your personal teacher.
About that, let me
My
skip
job
that. Video.
He is president president of a republic, but he lives like a feudal prince, or more correctly, an enlightened African chief. All up the West African coast, it is called dash, the small gift to a servant who has performed well. Crisp new U.S. currency to his workers and their families, and while the cameras are there, to just about anyone who asks. President Tolbert deplores the very idea that anyone might believe that Liberia is controlled by family compacts. We'll take a look at the country's biggest private business. The Meserato Corporation is involved in many things. Its biggest enterprise is fishing, catching and freezing shrimp and lobster for the export market. It also has a monopoly on commercial fishing for the domestic market. Vice President in charge of Meserato Fishing, Richard Tolbert, Harvard, Columbia Law School, and the president's nephew.
If you need to get any more people on a temporary basis, do.
Over at Meserato's headquarters, you'll find more Tolberts. Stephanette, vice president in charge of everything. Sietta Tolbert, working her way up through the finance department. And Lori Tolbert, in charge of retail sales. It's rare to find a firm anywhere that's such a family firm as this one.
If there's any crisis, the family automatically binds together. So that if there are any kind of problems, it's just a matter of picking up the phone and saying, I need you, and everybody comes. And that's the way we've been brought up.
Business is business, politics is politics, and family is family. President Tolbert says he'll not run again when his term is up in 5 years.
We don't have $750,000 to give you either.
Among the most likely candidates are Shad Tubman, son of the former president and son-in-law of Mr. Tolbert. But the man most people in Monrovia say is the hottest candidate is this man, A. Benedict Tolbert, trained at Oberlin University, a gentleman farmer, a dynamo of a politician, and the son of the president.
I am the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Representatives. I'm also the co-chairman on the Committee on Education. I'm also a member of the Committee on Information and Cultural Affairs. Out of government, I am president of the Liberian Federation of Trade Unions, also a minister of the gospel, an evangelist and spiritualist.
That's a pretty full day you've described.
That's right. Personally, I am a child of the universe, and I belong to the school of ascended masters teaching called the Great White Brotherhood. There are several hierarchies in the universal cosmological world. And so you have a master in charge of wealth, who is called the Master Fortuna. You have a master in charge of governments and nations of the world called El Moya. You have a master in charge of freedom of the universe called Saint Germain. You have a master for justice called Portia. You have a master for wisdom called the goddess of Mercury. But this does not bring about blasphemy, nor does it make about several gods. It doesn't bring about a pantheon of gods. And if it were not so, I would not have told you.
Tell me, in purely practical terms, and one hears this rumored about in the political circles here, that you're a pretty good candidate to be the next president of Liberia.
I believe I am because of the way I live. You see, God doesn't make many leaders. He makes few leaders. If he made many leaders, then he wouldn't have followers.
No, but in a purely personal way, does this cause some family quarrels?
Not
or
at all,
tensions?
not at all. I am not ambitious to become president. I only regard myself as a presidential timber because I know I'm capable of governing not only Liberia but the whole of Africa. And if the great divine master of human events decides through the minds of the people to use me as a presidential candidate, not only will I rule Liberia, but I shall endeavor to rule the whole of Africa by uniting the continent.
To one.
This is my goal, my objective, and my aim in my lifetime to see Africa united.
With A.B. Tolbert as president.
Maybe.
A chip from the block. And I gather you were a chip off your old man's block. Liberians at an official level deny that the country is ruled by nepotism. But at the same time, they point to a number of things. that in white America it is not unknown for certain powerful families to be in politics and business at the same time, or for the same old names to keep getting all the good jobs, or for networks of relatives and friends to look after their own, or for men in public life to be unfaithful to their wives. It's just that in the United States, hypocritically, we try to cover it up. That, rather refreshingly, is not one of the American qualities those African pilgrim fathers brought with them when they came to the Dark Continent.
Okay, so and let me say a couple things real quick. So first, like I said, I don't believe these were ex slaves that were um, basically slaves from birth and slaves their whole life. These were not the people that went over there and colonized Africa. These were their brothers, like the guy said, right? He said he's a part of the Great White Brotherhood of something. But anyway, it said that they started free elections. Really? What does that even mean? I mean, because I don't understand it over here. Free elections. You kept a third of your citizens from voting for over 100 years. That wasn't no free election. It was more like rigged elections. But anyway, the Tubmans. So I thought they were liberators. How do you liberate in America but then go over there and become a dictator? I'm just saying. I know it's a different family member, but still, same family. And then the president says he's a Baptist minister and he's the president of the World Baptist Society, a Christian pastor with 13 children outside of his wife. And he said that's okay. The strange things that people say that they're Christian can do. You can say you're Christian and do all this stuff, but you're not a Bible believer. To me, that's my personal opinion. Um, and then you see in the video that they were there to exploit resources, whatever was in the land, the gold, the iron, the rubber, the whatever, and the people, exploit the people. Same thing that was done in America. They were colonizers. They were brothers. They're all working together. And in order to rule in Liberia, you needed to be able to trace your lineage back to the Exodus. I was thinking they were talking about the Exodus from Africa. No, they were talking about the Exodus from America. So as long as you are one of the original families that left America and came to this area called Liberia, then you could be a part of the ruling class. What? Went over there and made themselves royalty. Okay. And whenever they want to go get educated, they come to America, get educated, and come back for more exploitation. Mm. And they keep it within the family. So those original families and even other families, I don't know if the other black families are a part of this, but they marry within those families. So they keep those same families will continue to rule throughout the generations. Sounds like America. And then the Tolbert son that was going to be taking the father's place. Did you hear him say that he's an evangelist? I was getting disgusted listening to him talk, though, actually. And then start talking about all this other stuff, all these other pantheon of gods. Mm, mm, mm. He said his goal is to rule all of Africa. You ain't even African. You want to go? All right. That was the Donald Trump of Africa in the 19 whatever year that was, 80s or whatever. Okay, let's watch the other video.
As we close out.
Okay, so this video is from I think this year. Yeah, 4 months ago. I guess during Black History Month. They are talking about the descendants of those people that went to Liberia originally and how some of those people have returned to America. Okay, so let's watch this video real quick.
Now, Black History Month, we turn now to a remarkable but often overlooked chapter of U.S. history, one that connects the United States to the West African nation of Liberia, founded more than 2 centuries ago by freed African Americans. ABC's Inez de Lucatera takes us on a journey through history to see how their legacy and their search for freedom continues to shape a country known as the Land of Liberty.
You'd be forgiven for thinking this is somewhere in America. From the street signs to the yellow school buses and monuments like this Masonic temple, even a flag that looks very familiar. But we're a long way from the U.S. This is Liberia, a small nation on the western coast of Africa, and its story is intrinsically tied to America's. It's a little-known chapter in U.S. history. In the 1800s, a group of white Americans created what was known as the American Colonization Society. Its aim was to repatriate formerly enslaved Americans to Africa, even though many had been in the U.S. for generations. Liberian historian Dr. C. Patrick Burroughs.
They aimed to form a colony in Africa and to have free blacks who chose to leave and go to Liberia. They were joined by people who were politicians and who thought that the repatriation of blacks to Africa was important to preserve stability in the U.S. And as long as free blacks were here, they would influence those who were enslaved, and those who were enslaved might rebel.
The ACS set about buying land in Africa and chose to call it Liberia. In other words, the land of the free. Its capital, Monrovia, was named after U.S. President James Monroe. Among those who would make the journey was William D. Coleman, a young boy who'd grown up on the Wardlaw plantation in Fayette County, Kentucky. James Wardlaw's will shows that upon his death, he wanted all enslaved people on his plantation to be liberated, on the condition they emigrate to Liberia. Wardlaw adding, "But such of my slaves as decline going to Liberia shall be sold as slaves." Dr. Burroughs says records show that in 1853, William, his mother Ellen, and an uncle boarded a ship in Baltimore and set sail for Liberia.
Life was rough because you're coming into a place that's new, certainly not as rough as it would have been on a plantation, and now you're working for yourself.
Eventually, the Colemans landed here in what was dubbed Kentucky in Africa, where relics of the past still stand to this day, and where we met up with some of Coleman's direct descendants.
From the time they came in, they started fighting things after the United States. The flag, the everything.
It's estimated about 15,000 freed Black Americans resettled in Liberia. They set about building a country based on what they knew, overcoming some challenges from the local population. In the Liberian jungle, one can still find buildings that look almost identical to those in the American South.
These are the buildings that people who came from the U.S. had built. The structures on, say, Jefferson's plantation or Madison's plantation were not built by Jefferson himself. He might have designed them, but the actual enslaved people were the ones who built them. So they had those skills.
At this Baptist church in 1847, Liberians even signed their own Declaration of Independence.
It was a land of freedom, and it still is, regardless of what the issues are. Liberia is still a land of freedom. Anyone can come and settle in Liberia. True land of liberty.
And William D. Coleman, born enslaved on an American plantation, would eventually grow up to become the nation's 13th president. But the Coleman search for freedom wouldn't end there. Decades later, during the brutal Liberian Civil War, a portion of the family chose to flee the violence by heading back to America. Outside of Washington, D.C., we meet 93-year-old Genevieve Coleman Garnett and her son James.
When you get married, right?
19 years old.
19 years old. Okay, this was in 1951. I don't think anybody ever planned to come back, But when the coup took place, thank God we had a place of refuge that we could come back to, and settle again and try to start all over, But, America and Liberia have always had a very close relationship. It's a full cycle, right?
Every year now, the Colemans hold a big family reunion. What began in 1998 as a small core gathering of Colemans has now blossomed into a massive event with as many as 300 American and Liberian Colemans attending.
We hope that they don't get mixed up and don't know who they are. We wanted them to know who they were and where they came from.
A chance to reflect on their shared legacy and give back. The descendants of William D. Coleman also created a foundation aimed at rebuilding the nation that gave them liberty.
Life is based.
That gave them liberty.
Life is better here, than it is over there. We got to continue to work though, and remember, who we are, why we came, where we came from, and do what we can to help the situation over there.
An important part of history. Inez de Lucatera, thank you.
So, as you can see, they went to Africa, and then when the trouble started and they couldn't be on top no more, they came back to America. That's my personal opinion, but I could be wrong. Definitely can. So anyway, it says I wrote down some little notes here while I was watching the video. The first thing she said in that was the Masonic Temple and the flag with 49 less stars. But the first thing that they showed in that last clip was the American looking flag and a Masonic temple. And I'm always talking about their brothers. It doesn't matter what skin color they are. According to the Oriental mystical rites of, or the Oriental rite of Orient, or the rites of Oriental Masonry, mystical rites of Oriental Masonry, it didn't matter who they were. If they were initiated as a brother, they're a brother. Just like on Rosewood, they were brothers. They were just showing it in the movies. So what was the first thing she said? A Masonic temple. Okay. I'm not saying that they necessarily built a temple. I'm saying that this brotherhood of Masonic brothers or whatever is worldwide and always has been, and it goes back thousands of years. Okay. See the side. The guy said the free blacks were messing up things for the free blacks in America were messing up things for their idea of slavery, for them continuing their slavery. But they were messing up things for the false idea of white superiority, because they had to try to convince the Negro Americans that they were inferior to the white people and that they're destined to be their slaves. Well, you can't have all these other free blacks walking around rich and prominent, and these black people wondering, well, why come he not no slave? So it was causing a conflict, I guess. But that's not why they went back there. They sent those people over there because they were never ever able to colonize Africa. It wasn't the Lord's will, I guess, because they were not able to do it. Only South Africa. And according to Jack Forbes and some other writers, the people in South Africa are people that they took from America hundreds of years ago. So the other thing was they based their society on what they knew. This is what the lady in the news broadcast said. So they only knew how to be like their oppressors, like their masters. They couldn't go over there and do something totally different. No. Went over there and did exactly like their so-called oppressors. And then the lady said, Liberia is the land of the free. She said, uh, she said that anybody can come to Liberia and live a free life. Okay, that sounds like America. Anybody that's can come over from Europe and come to America and be free and live a great life. Any African American can come from America. That means American blacks can come from America and be free in Liberia. What about the Liberians or the people, the Zoans? Why can't they be free in their own country? That's not freedom when you're oppressing other people. Um, and I don't really think that they went over there and built nothing. If there were American style plantations built with brick in the 1840s, I don't think so. If it was built with wood, maybe. Um, So I believe that they did the same thing over there that was done here. They took things that was once the natives or the indigenous people and they claimed it for themselves. Deals are made with other leaders and then betrayal and subjugation. And I think that's the same thing that happened. So anyway, thanks for watching. See you next video. Have a good day. Please like, share, and subscribe and leave me a comment. Thank you.